Well, good evening and welcome to Queer News Tonight. This is the world's first and only LGBTQ+ daily evening television news. We're broadcasting live and then available on demand, and we're available on all smart televisions, including Roku, Apple TV, Android TV, Amazon Fire TV, YouTube, and Facebook. It's time to queer up the news. It's Tuesday, August 22nd, 2023. And we are live and unedited and literally out of the closet and into the headlines. So many of your important stories we're going to tell this evening on Queer News Tonight.
This is the world's first live daily LGBTQ evening news show, literally out of the closet and into the headlines on Queer News Tonight with Al Ferguson.
I'm your anchor at Queer News Tonight, Al Ferguson, and this evening we bring you the news of and a perspective representing the LGBTQ+ community from South Florida, America, and across our planet.
This is the world's first and only unedited live LGBTQ+ evening news show. Whatever happens unique in LGBTQ+ news, you will see it and hear it.
Hotspots Magazine Happening Out Television Network is a nonprofit 501c3 media company in the same model of PBS and NPR, but designed for the LGBTQ+ community. Our mission is to support the 10 pillars of our LGBTQ+ community. We want to inform and educate the key issues of our Black community, Latino, lesbian, and queer women, trans students, youth, seniors, HIV/AIDS, healthcare, business, social justice, and faith. Help us support our community.
We are part of one of the largest LGBTQ+ media companies in America, Hotspots Magazine and Happening Out Television Network. Our magazine is celebrating 38 years of the LGBTQ+ experience, and our television news, talk, and entertainment shows support our mission to educate the LGBTQ+ and broader community.
Well, let's welcome anchor Cameron Glass. Cameron is a South Florida actor and musician, as well as part of the permanent host cast of the most popular live LGBTQ+ talk show in the world. It's Happening Out. Welcome, Cameron.
Thank you so much for having me once again.
Next, let's welcome anchor Glen Weinzimer. Glen is the founder of the Smart Ride, which will be celebrating its 20th anniversary on November 17 and 18, which has raised almost $15 million. He is also the owner of Bona Italian Restaurant in Wilton Manors on the famous Wilton Drive. In the past 6 years, Bona has raised over $60,000 to help local organizations. Welcome, Glen.
Thank you, Al. It's less than 100 days from Smart Ride.
Exciting. You have a $2 million goal?
We have a $2 million goal. It's ambitious, but I believe in our community.
Ambitious, and I believe in our community.
That's what I just said.
Yes, I said that too. I said it first, I think. Next, let's welcome anchor Maxx Fenning. At 17, he formed the nonprofit PRISM to promote LGBTQ+ inclusive education and make sexual health resources accessible to youth in South Florida. He is a senior at the University of Florida, and he's also a host at It's Happening Out. Hi, Max.
Hi, it's my third and final senior year. My mom keeps asking me when I'm going to finally graduate, and I tell her I'm 21. Chill out.
That's right. Chill out. All right. We are the reporters for Queer News Tonight, and this evening we begin with the queer headlines. The LGBTQ+ community in South Florida and across America is diverse. Our community across the world is vast, and here are the bullet points of the queer news for today, Tuesday, August 22nd. Let's begin by queering up sports. InterMiami CF and Lionel Messi bring world-class soccer matches to Fort Lauderdale through October. Greater Fort Lauderdale features sports venues like the Coral Springs Aquatic Center and the Fort Lauderdale Aquatic Complex, unique venues like the Bergeron Rodeo Grounds and Gulfstream Park, and major event spaces like FLA Live Arena and the Greater Fort Lauderdale Broward County Convention Center. And state-of-the-art facilities such as Central Broward Regional Park and Anson Sports Complex. Home to the Broward County Sports Hall of Fame, Greater Fort Lauderdale is a sports enthusiast dream and the ideal year-round location for your sporting event. Club Internacional de Football Miami, also better known as InterMiami CF, which is owned by David Beckham and Jorge Mas, is the newest pro soccer team in South Florida. The team has Lionel Messi as its forward player along with Joseph Martinez. Both Lionel and Joseph are the top scorers of the team and internationally known. InterMiami CF has several upcoming matches at the DRV Pink Stadium here in Greater Fort Lauderdale. The season runs through the end of October, so whether you're already a fan or curious as to why soccer is the top sport in the world, the Greater Fort Lauderdale area is ready for you. Visit Lauderdale, everyone under the sun. Well, I love this story because, first, gay community, lots of people don't think it's a natural sports mix. I have friends that call it sports ball. And this is a perfect example. Messi is one of the great sports stars in the entire world. LeBron James level, playing right here in Fort Lauderdale and interacting. It's very funny. David Beckham, as everybody knows, Bend It Like Beckham, the documentary, and his wife, original Spice Girl. It's leading the idea that the LGBTQ community should be interested in sports. And when they picked up Messi, one of the things that I did because of David Beckham is I went in because of something he said. And I don't know if you've seen Ryan Reynolds' Netflix show called, I believe it's Netflix, called Welcome to Wrexham, and his purchase of the Wrexham football team, which is soccer. That's what InterMiami is, and it's fun, and I'm learning a lot about it, and I'm trying to immerse myself in it. And the stadium is only about 10 minutes from here. It's right on top of our gay community in Wilton Manors, and I think it's a nice addition for us here in Fort Lauderdale and Wilton Manors.
It's so cute to hear you talk about sports as if you know something about
sports ball.
Because I'll be honest, I know nothing and I'm not interested.
Yeah.
But Beckham is cute, and the only reason I remember him is from when two of the princes or whatever it was in England got married. I remember him being there with all of his tattoos.
Yeah. Thanks for that in-depth sports knowledge.
You're welcome. I've got more of that.
Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts about sports?
I'm personally very excited, not only from a sports perspective, because I actually really like soccer, believe it or not. I'm seeing already just on the drive so many people wearing the Messi shirts. They're getting hyped. They're bringing themselves and their friends and family to Wilton Drive, which, as somebody who, me and Glenn work on the drive a lot, it's bringing business, which is something that we need, especially in the summertime.
One related observation to that, and it would be nice, maybe not this season, maybe next season, that it has some spillover effect on Bona, on Wilton Drive. Mm-hmm. Wilton Drive is very close to this stadium. I have a friend that works in a restaurant that is about 1.5 miles, 2 miles from the stadium, just slightly closer to Wilton Drive, and they have noticed the significant increase of the business traffic into the restaurant. The other thing that I think is interesting is we got to give a shout out. Wilton Drive and the LGBTQ community in Fort Lauderdale is everything. We're not any one thing. And a perfect example of that is Gym Bar on Wilton Drive.
Exactly.
They are just loving Messi and InterMiami, and they're packing out for the games that are being broadcast at Gym Bar. So it's a bar full of gay people that are cheering on the new hometown team. I think that's great.
All right, let's move on. Next, let's queer politics. Anti-LGBTQ plus Guatemalan presidential election frontrunner intends to govern with the fear of God. Guatemalan presidential contender Sandra Torres voiced her staunch opposition to same-sex marriage, abortion, and LGBTQ plus rights. Speaking at a school, the former First Lady took care to clarify that her stance did not equate to homophobia and emphasized her wish for the government to acknowledge life starting at conception, and her intention to govern, quote, with the fear of God, end quote. Leading the National Unity of Hope Party, which holds significant sway as the second largest group in the unicameral legislature, Torres has been gradually aligning herself more with the right-wing ideologies. Recent polls had shown her as a top presidential choice, having secured 16% of the votes in the initial voting round on June 25th. Her current presidential campaign, marking her third attempt, has seen her partnering with a right-wing evangelical pastor as her vice president. She has strongly reiterated her commitment against legalizing abortion and has consistently opposed LGBTQ+ rights. Some political analysts believe Torres' shift to the right could be a strategic move to garner support from the nation's influential evangelical churches, thereby ensuring their continued alliance with the government. Although the National Unity of Hope Party was once known for its social democratic leanings, it, like Torres, has veered towards the right. This is interesting because I think it parallels stuff that goes on in our country. We seem to swing to the right very far, and then they get into power and everyone realizes how crazy things are, and you see the pendulum swing back. And, I'm hoping that's sort of what's going to happen there, unless they wake up before the election and actually decide that she is not the right presidential candidate.
My favorite part is that she says she's not homophobic. I hate gay people. I don't support LGBT rights, but it's different somehow.
Yeah. I'm going to protect your uterus.
Love the sin, hate the sinner. Wait, other way around, I think, actually. I'm not too much fond of any of that altogether. And, I'm a little worried because their rival, who's at 11%, I believe, in votes, Bernardo Arevalo, is maintaining his stance on abortion in a similar fashion, but has remained quiet on his opinions on same-sex marriage, LGBTQ+ rights. So I'm kind of wondering where the system's going to bring both of these, candidates.
Guatemala is at great risk. Guatemala is not an economic power. They can easily be isolated in not only Central America, but in the Western Hemisphere. And Guatemala has a significant immigration policy, flight out of Guatemala, brain drain out of Guatemala, specifically to the United States. I will do everything we can to put this news story that we're reporting in front of LGBTQ community in Guatemala. But I would warn this candidate. It's easy to move to the right because the right, especially the radical right, seems to be very loyal in the foaming at the mouth voting experience. At the end of the day, whether that's the overall decision of the nation, you don't know. In most instances, it is not. In some instances, it is. So Guatemala and its electorate have the decision-making capability. Do you want to be in the broad general world, especially in Central America and the Western Hemisphere, of most nations in the Western Hemisphere being very embracive of minority, marginalized community rights, which includes LGBT? Or do you want to be in the category of Niger and Uganda and Hungary and Russia? And I would suggest for Guatemala that they should watch what's happening in Africa very closely. Uganda and Niger both said basically the same things that this candidate for president of Guatemala has said. And now they're facing backlash from the World Bank, from the United Nations, from the African Union, saying everything that they're doing in Africa are unacceptable to the principles of an international community. That is exactly what will happen to Guatemala if she takes this forward. And by the way, it's one of the reasons why elections matter, because we want a president of the United States that enforces that on Guatemala. Guatemala, we're watching you closely, and this may not work out very well for you.
Next, let's queer up the worldview. Putin advisor says U.S. is brainwashing Ukrainian soldiers with gay sex to make super soldiers. An advisor to Russian President Vladimir Putin has claimed that Ukraine's military will become, quote, unified through gay sex, unquote, like the Greek Spartans. While the comment may seem bizarre, it's just the latest example of Russian authorities using anti-LGBTQ plus nationalist sentiment to justify its unprovoked war against Ukraine. Sergei Markov, a former advisor to Putin, while appearing on Russian TV, said the U.S. and Ukraine will use neurolinguistic programming and other brainwashing techniques to turn Ukrainian soldiers gay against their will. In reality, there's no evidence that psychological methods can change a person's sexual orientation. He said, quote, "They have an artificial political science fascism created by American and British political technologists. They will turn them into zombies, into cult members. I think they will force them to become homosexuals," end quote. There is some historical evidence to suggest that the Spartans of ancient Greece may have encouraged homosexual activity as a way to encourage soldiers to stay in the military and fight for their partners' lives. However, the most famous gay militia force in ancient Greece was actually not Spartan, but the Sacred Band of Thebes, an elite military force deliberately composed of 150 gay or bisexual couples that defeated the Spartans and murdered both Spartan kings in a single campaign. Regardless, Markov's comment may be less interested in historical accuracy and more interested in inspiring anti-LGBTQ plus disgust. Inspiring anti-LGBTQ plus disgust has been a recurring theme with Putin, unfortunately, and seeing how he's pushing this idea on American and Ukrainian soldiers to pull these people together and, once again push a homophobic agenda is, a reoccurring theme that's not going to end anytime soon in my eyes.
Is anyone laughing in their head of all of the adjective descriptions that were used by
the science fascism, whatever? It's very
filling word count.
Gay super soldier.
It is very much like adding a bunch of spaces and making the text white so you can meet a word count on an essay.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think this is what happens when you have what we are unfortunately veering towards in the United States, which is like state-controlled media, right? We have seen it sort of flew under the radar because it was thankfully so ridiculous for now that it did not pass. But we had a bill that was introduced that would have required critics of Ron DeSantis and other politicians to sign up with a registry in the state. Right? We are seeing, and obviously we're seeing all sorts of censorship that is passing into law. But we're seeing the censorship against freedom of press, freedom of speech, and academic freedom. And this is what that results in. Right? When you have a single party that is controlling the information that goes out, you get ridiculous buffoonery like this.
And Putin started this whole war by doing the same kind of thing. He said that they were inbreeding Nazis and that he was there to cleanse them. And now it's going to be the LGBTQ community and it's going to be gay people that are going to be super soldiers, and we have to get rid of all this zombies. Zombies that he's creating, in people's minds that, oh my God, we need to fear them because everything that they do there is bad. Yeah. And that's been his mantra since the start of this war. Note to self personally, I've got to read more about Thebes. I want to know more about what's going on in Thebes. I'm going to Greece this fall with many people from South Florida. And I want to learn more about it. There's a Spartacus or something. Wait, I'm going to. He
was born there.
What is so funny about this story is somebody that would use words like zombies. We've all referenced them in this story. There are so many jokes running in my head. The only thing is, in all of the jokes that are running through my head, it's really not funny. And that's what I hear you just say. Because the humor here is completely lost in the seriousness of the radical crazy of the words that you're using. And for me, first, you wonder, why would they characterize this in the way that they're doing? And quickly you get to the conclusion that they're doing that in Russia to help justify their actions against another sovereign nation using homophobia as their justification, because they're sitting thinking, well, wait, if we other them enough, we gain support of the illegal actions that we're taking in the Ukraine. And then, after you consider that, and Glenn and I have talked about this so many times, don't you wonder, in the last 100 years, have we ever seen this before? Well, yes. Then you begin to wonder, well, I wonder what the jokes were in 1932 and 1933 about the Jews. They start with the ridiculousness of the character stereotypes of the Jews, which Germans generally probably thought were funny, like this, zombies and gay super soldiers, until it's no longer funny because you realized that was the platform to get them to the conclusion that happened by 1941. And that's what Russia's doing.
Right. Yeah. No. Exactly. That's exactly what we're seeing. Is this brainwashing? The brainwashing is the brainwashing of the Russian people, again with state-controlled media.
Yeah.
Well, next, let's queer up gay culture. It Gets Better project leaves X social media platform, claiming it's not a safe space. The It Gets Better project, which seeks to support and empower LGBTQ+ youth worldwide, says it is going to cease posting on Twitter, recently renamed X, because the platform is no longer a safe space. Ross von Metzke, Senior Director of Communications and Public Relations at It Gets Better, told The Advocate that the platform has recently been allowing hateful comments to rise to the top of the feed and has made it almost impossible to block hate speech. Metzke said for adults, it's fairly easy to recognize and disregard hate speech, but officials at It Gets Better worry about the effects of this speech on young people, the primary audience the organization seeks to reach. It Gets Better will leave existing content on X, but won't post anything new unless the platform changes its policies. The organization will remain active on all other social media platforms. There have been many complaints about hate speech increasing on Twitter and now X since billionaire businessman Elon Musk took it over last year. The Center for Countering Digital Hate and the Anti-Defamation League both published reports in December citing rises in hate speech, with the Center for Countering Digital Hate focusing on racist, anti-gay, and anti-trans slurs, the Anti-Defamation League on anti-Semitism. And a report from GLAAD in June found that of all five major social media sites, it was the least safe for LGBTQ+ users. We're seeing a platform that has, predominantly been used for political discourse, but it's obviously, still widely used by young people, become increasingly hostile. We recently had Elon Musk decide that cis is a slur for whatever reason. When we're talking about blocking hate speech, Elon Musk also proffered the idea of removing the block feature itself from the app, saying that it was useless. It then came out that you're actually not allowed to do that as a social media platform and still have your app on the Google Play Store or the Apple Store. But he wanted to do it nonetheless, right? It's because he is willfully making a hostile space for marginalized people in a way that, it's no secret that social media negatively impacts young people's mental health. We've been saying it, immediately following the invention of social media. But it really exacerbates that issue.
And I wonder if Trump is reporting on that platform, if he'll allow him to block who he doesn't want to be heard because he favors his side of the story. Be interesting to see that if that block feature suddenly reappears for certain individuals, but not for other groups.
No, he'll just flee to Truth Social.
Exactly.
Cameron, I'm curious. You're Gen Z. Do you agree with this idea that It Gets Better takes an active stand against X, Twitter, because of the risk of bullying and other related issues? Is that a concern of yours as a Gen Zer?
A concern of mine is knowing that a community that helps me, my people, my friends, my family, is saying, hey, we're taking a step back from this platform. We're going to be everywhere else that we normally are, and even new places, but this is just not the environment we're going to surround ourselves with. We're going to keep everything that we've done and have here, but hey, we're taking a step away. I think that's very professional. I think that's very admirable, and saying I don't need to put up and deal with hate that's being constantly barraged at me. I acknowledge and accept that it's going to be a thing, but I'm going to continue my work elsewhere. The main concern and issue is that people are going to take that as we did it. We're stopping them from doing this here. We can do it everywhere else. So I'm afraid of that being that turnout.
Do you have a similar concern?
Yeah, I mean, I think that to some extent, we talk about a representation and visibility matters, and that includes in these spaces where discussion are happening, right? I will say, I think that Twitter has not been a super it hasn't really been a go-to platform for Gen Z. It's largely a younger millennial platform, maybe an older Gen Z platform, and I don't think that younger members of Gen Z are really super active on that so much as they are on Instagram and TikTok, especially. especially, but there's still a presence there. And I think that it's important for our community to have a voice in spaces where this discourse is happening, where there's a significant amount of political discourse about our rights and the rights of people like us, that having that presence and having that vocal support is so important.
You know, just in terms of a few factual observations and in terms of what it gets better has said, a couple of factual notes about X and Twitter, or I'm sorry, X and the brand, whatever Elon Musk says the brand is. A few facts. One of which is the vast majority of people that are anti the decision making of decisions like this are very conservative and are supportive of Elon Musk and the platform because of the voice that they have, which is much more critical, much more right-leaning, much more radical, evangelical, et cetera, and so on. And so as a result, they fall into this camp that marginalizing communities is okay in social media. And I think that says volumes about the platform, which is probably one of the issues that this is being implemented in. Elon Musk is an ultimate and uber free speecher. Now let's assume that that's true. I'm not sure it is true, but he says it is true. And one of the things that I think it is really interesting that is going on, that he is super hypercritical over a story like It Gets Better, is he's a uber free speecher, but they have lost 50% of all of the advertisers on their platform. That is a factual statement. Half of all of the advertisers that were there 24 months ago are no longer there. He is critical of that in the same vein, however, where the Supreme Court has said money is free speech, so it's okay to contribute to election campaigns. Why doesn't it work exactly the same way to your social media platform? Okay, you spent $40 billion on buying it, and half of all of your advertisers said, now we don't want to spend our money there. That is the expression of their free speech, except Elon Musk is critical over it. And so unless he responds to issues, of which there are countless numbers, like It Gets Better, he can't turn X, because people, especially businesses that are expressing their free speech through their advertising money, they're not going to stay with you if you support, like the block example. Unless you are going to have a platform that is safe for everyone, middle of the road commercial advertisers are not going to support you. And they're expressing their free speech by not spending their money on you left and right. It Gets Better is no different than what Ford Motor Company is doing. Both are saying X is not safe. That's it.
You're done.
I'm done.
Okay, we're going to move on. Next, let's clear up Road to Stonewall. Monument for LGBTQ plus Holocaust victims vandalized in Berlin. German authorities are investigating whether there is a connection between two arson attacks that were carried out in central Berlin that targeted 3 Holocaust memorials. Among the memorials was one dedicated to the LGBTQ plus people who died during the Nazi regime. Recently, arsonists attempted to burn a monument in Berlin Tiergarten, dedicated to LGBTQ plus people persecuted under the National Socialist government. An unknown person threw a burning object at the memorial with a note containing a modified version of a Bible verse regarding gay people. The monument, which was erected in 2008, didn't suffer permanent damage. Later that day, a book box at the Gleis 17 or Platform 17 Holocaust Memorial in Grunewald caught fire. A man allegedly set fire to a box inside the former phone booth that serves as a free book exchange location. Firefighters extinguished the flames, but almost all of the books had been destroyed by the fire. In the book box, the majority of the books were about Jewish life in Berlin, Germany during the Nazi era and the persecution of the Jews during that period. We talk a lot about what happened during Hitler's reign and stuff, and then here we see once again, there's been a surge in anti-Semitism around the world. I'm not wearing it tonight, but I've been wearing my Jewish star on a more regular basis now, just because my sister's doing it in New York, because there is so much hate out there, and you want to see things like we're no different than everybody else. It's like the LGBT, we're no different than everyone else, and we all should be treated with respect. What is garnered or gained out of this, other than propaganda? This burning a former phone booth that is now as a book exchange. Like, what do you get by burning the books? I mean, it's like us banning books here in Florida. Like, that doesn't erase history by doing something like that. So I think these are both bad things that are happening just as a small touch on a larger issue that's at hand.
Glenn, I'm curious. The issue of how it affects fascist support in Germany, which is clearly a gigantic issue, and how it reflects in terms of the attacks on LGBTQ community. Here at home, we're reporting this at Queer News Tonight, talking about this is happening in Germany. And we think it's important what's happening in Germany as an illustration of what we see happening in the United States. Do you see the connection between anti-Semitism and homophobic attacks? Do you make the connections, or do you think that that's not as clear?
I think I definitely make the connection because, during the Holocaust, not only were Jews put in concentration camps, but I can't remember the exact number, but let's say it was 17 or 50,000 LGBT folks were also segregated, put into Auschwitz and all these other camps.
The Pink Triangle.
The Pink Triangle. And when the Nazis were overthrown, those who were LGBT were not released like all the Jews and everyone else. They were considered still prisoners, and they were still put into prison camps and stuff for being gay. So, there is definitely a connection of this hate, and the hate for the LGBTQ community sustained itself through Europe after the Jews were, the Nazis were suppressed and they freed the Jews. I mean, us as a community were not, able to walk away with your head held high. A lot of them were. A lot of other terrible things were done to them just by the fact of who they are.
And for both of you, I'm curious, how does it wash over you that books are under attack in Germany?
It's a very, very sort of poetic, stark parallel, right? When we see, these attacks against, again, it's a freedom of speech issue. It's a freedom of press issue. It's an academic freedom issue. And so when we see the stories of marginalized people quite literally burned, right? We don't, when we're being extra poetic with it, we don't call it book banning, we call it book burning, right? And now we're seeing the literal physical embodiment of that exact practice happening in this phone booth of these stories quite literally being burnt to a crisp is a really, really scary parallel to what we see here in Florida.
Having two generations, no offense, of gay Jews at the table, one thing
What are you saying?
Hi, old. One thing that we both can identify with is not only our, sexuality and our, LGBTQ plus families, but also our Jewish heritage and identity that has been affected us throughout our entirety of life. We've been taught the Holocaust, we've been taught about all that. And I don't know about you, but for me later in life is when I learned, queer people were segregated, treated, a little bit, it was also awful and horrible, but a little bit worse with, forced, declothing and intermingling of.
There were a lot of tests and things that were done on gay people that may not have been done on other humans because they treated them as animals, if you will. And that was so severe and disgusting is the best way I can put it.
Thank you. Yes.
You're welcome.
I needed that help because it's hard to talk about sometimes. And the fact that we're able to sit here and talk about it with you and all of you is something that I'm very thankful to be able to do today. So thank you.
And
guys.
I think as a Jew, and I'm not a religious Jew. I mean, I grew up in a very reformed family, but any of our holidays and stuff, it's all about persecution dating back in time to the beginning. It's always about being persecuted in Egypt, is being persecuted like throughout our history. And so, you'd think that's history, but it's not. It's still happening. And so you're still a targeted minority, if you will, at the same time as you blend in with everybody else.
You know, one last thought related to both, actually all three of your observations. You know, it doesn't require the state to be the oppressor like it was in World War II and the camps in Nazi Germany and led by the master plan of Adolf Hitler. Rachel Maddow is continuing at MSNBC to make the observation that since the January 6th riots on the Capitol, that what we've watched over the last 2 years is a motivational change. People have not been able to get a call to action, including Donald Trump, of saying, take to the streets and riot in defense for me about these charges, et cetera, and so on. And Rachel Maddow continues to make the point that it is not a collective attack now that we're watching in America, that we're watching lone terrorists. And that's what happened here. It's an individual that creates a societal fear of burning this phone booth and these books. And what we're watching in the United States, the person in Utah that very actively says, I'm going to kill the president and I'm going to kill the district attorney in New York City because of their opposition to Donald Trump. And I am going to take this action. It's not large groups of hundreds of people that are coming together. It's the lone terrorist. We reported this week of the straight woman who has a business that flies a flag at her business, flies a rainbow flag, who is married and has 9 children, and it so offended the terrorist, he took the gun and shot her on the steps of her business in Lake Arrowhead, California. I think Rachel Maddow is onto something. She has, because of religious understanding that we're talking about right now, and LGBT understanding that we're talking about right now, I think she's onto something, that we're watching, like in this example, something that is now again transitioning different in our society. That it's not the Proud Boys that we have to fear, it is the lone gunman.
Well, it's not that that we don't fear the Proud Boys. It's easy to figure out who they are. The lone wolf, you don't know who it is amongst us. And that's what's the scary part, because it's harder to identify that individual if they're not on social media or they're just a one-off and there's lots of crazies that never do anything. But it takes that one crazy to do something. We know what the Proud Boys want. You know, it's much easier to watch over them than it is to follow their social media because they have such a large following than it is that lone wolf.
Yeah, very interesting.
Here's a sneak peek of some of the top stories in this week's issues of Out South Florida on Stands Thursday and always online.
This week in Out South Florida, powered by Queer News Tonight. I'm Out South Florida senior reporter John Hayden. In this week's issue, after a long wait and a very long meeting, very little drama. Redevelopment of Shops of Wilton Manors takes a big step forward. Also, DeSantis tried to silence drag queens. Now they're speaking out on the biggest night of his flailing presidential campaign. And Pride Hub at the Pub on the Drive makes a VIP debut. Then came a problem. I'm John Hayden. Those stories and more in Out South Florida, on Stands now and always updated online.
Partnership with Sunshine Cathedral, the world's largest queer church here in Fort Lauderdale. Supporting that partnership, we are broadcasting from our permanent set here at Sunshine Cathedral at the Happening Out television studios. We broadcast Sunshine Cathedral's Sunday International Service at 10:30 a.m.
Well, we finish tonight's Queer News headlines with a segment we call LGBTQ plus 1 Minute News.
LGBTQ plus 1 minute news. Let's queer up politics. Gay panic defense ban signed into law by New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu. Last week, New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu signed legislation into state law that will ban gay trans panic as a legal defense in criminal cases. Both the Granite State House and Senate overwhelmingly passed the legislation earlier in the summer, sending it to the governor's desk for approval. The law means that defendants on trial in the Granite State may no longer excuse violent crimes on the basis of their victim's sexual or gender orientation. So-called panic defenses are a legal defense strategy that may be employed by a defendant.
LGBTQ plus 1 Minute News. Let's queer up trans rights. The ACLU allowed to join Kansas lawsuit fighting ID gender marker ban. A judge has agreed to allow the American Civil Liberties Union of Kansas to intervene in an ongoing lawsuit that seeks to force the state to list the sex that people were assigned at birth on their driver's licenses. Attorney General Chris Kobach filed a lawsuit last month seeking to compel the Kansas Department of Revenue to permanently halt gender marking changes, pointing to a new state law with strict definitions of sex along biological lines. The ACLU sought to become a party to the lawsuit, arguing that the interest of its transgender clients would be irreparably harmed if Kobach prevailed. The group says that the state agency isn't sufficiently raising constitutional arguments. In her ruling, Shawnee County Judge Teresa found that the ACLU has substantial interest in the litigation.
LGBTQ plus 1 minute news. Let's queer up the USA view. Gay Mecca of Palm Springs shut down by historic storm. Record rainfall from Hillary has overwhelmed the Southern California desert community of Palm Springs, which saw nearly 50% of its yearly rainfall in less than a day. Flash floods submerged roads, residential neighborhoods, and golf courses throughout the typically arid city. Palm Springs recorded 3.18 inches of rain Sunday, which is not only the wettest summer day the city has ever had, but also the record for most rainfall in a single day. Palm Springs Mayor Grace Garner urged residents to stay home as officials assess damage to roads, making travel around the area unsafe. Queer News Tonight will continue to follow the story as more information becomes available.
LGBTQ 1 minute news. Let's queer up entertainment. Hallmark announces new Rom-Com, Notes of Autumn, starring Luke Macfarlane and Peter Porte. The Hallmark Channel is announcing a new rom-com titled Notes of Autumn, just in time for the fall season. The film features the characters of Leo, played by Luke Macfarlane, a successful author who is experiencing a tough writer's block. Feeling the pressure to finish the new installment of his popular series of books, Leo swaps homes with his best friend Ellie, played by Ashley Williams, for a period of time. During his stay at Ellie's place, Leo ends up meeting Matt, played by Peter Porte, who helps him get out of his own way when it comes to writing something new and inspiring. Notes of Autumn is set to premiere on Saturday, September 16th on the Hallmark Channel.
LGBTQ plus 1 minute news. Let's queer up courts. Federal judge blocks ban on gender-affirming care in Georgia. A federal judge has blocked the state of Georgia from enforcing part of a new law that bans doctors from starting hormone therapy for transgender people under the age of 18. In a ruling, U.S. District Court Judge Sarah Garrity granted a preliminary injunction sought by several transgender children, parents, and community organizations in a lawsuit challenging the ban. Garrity said her ruling will block enforcement of the ban on hormone replacement therapy until a further court order or a trial. The Georgia Law Senate Bill 140 allows doctors to prescribe puberty-blocking medications, and it allows minors who are already receiving hormone therapy to continue.
That is today's news for the LGBTQ plus community on the world's first and only daily LGBTQ plus evening news show. If our community is important to you, share this news with your friends and family. Are you, like most of America, part of our very large television audience watching this live LGBTQ plus news broadcast right now on Roku, Apple TV, Android TV, and Amazon Fire TV?
Queer News Tonight is the only live LGBTQ plus digital television show in the world that is out of the closet and into the headlines. We need your support. If our community is to grow, we must tell our stories and bring them to the attention of the broader world.
This is the only place in the world that tells these types of LGBTQ plus stories in motion and sound. That is the passion of Hotspots Magazine, Happening Out Television Network, and Queer News Tonight.
I'm your anchor, Al Ferguson, and on behalf of these LGBTQ plus reporters, the anchors of Queer News Tonight, including Cameron Glass, Maxx Fenning, and Glen Weinzimer, we will see you daily at 8 p.m. And to our LGBTQ plus world, we wish you good night. We are Queer News Tonight, the world's first and